Zenitz right now. We're going to AL.com. Matt Zenitz, as I told you, I think 10 stories broken by Alabama. Matt Zenitz probably breaks 8 out of the 10. Matt Zenitz, welcome back to the game. I hope you're doing well, man.
Yeah, what's up, Ryan? How you doing?
Did I overestimate there? 8 out of 10, 10 stories broken by the University of Alabama. You're breaking at least 8 of those, right? 7 at the lowest.
Hey, I'll take whatever credit you want to give me, man.
Hey, no doubt. But listen, listen, it's a great follow. I mean, it's encouraging people to connect with you. Matt Zenitz on the Twitter account, AL.com. Breaks a lot of stories involving the University of Alabama. When you hear Nick Saban say reestablish the Alabama factor, what does that mean to you? What does that mean, reestablish the Alabama factor?
I think of preparation and mentality. So it seems like for whatever reason, team wasn't at a good point mentality-wise going into that last game. For Josh Jacobs during the course of an interview a few weeks ago talk about that leading into that game, that he just didn't see which you would expect from guys leading into the national championship game. And I think for Coach Saban, it comes down to just reestablishing what he would like to see in terms of mentality and approach.
The way that you see it, was coaching that big of an issue in your opinion?
I think it more comes down to just the lack of continuity with the coaching staff, and that's something where they're obviously going to need to deal with that again. But the guys that they had on the coaching staff last year obviously have great resumes, have been respected guys in the coaching world. But, I mean, I was talking to a former Alabama player about this recently, and regardless of how good you are as a coach, it's just different for a guy from a player standpoint, hearing the message and being coached by somebody who's been working with you for 3 or 4 years compared to somebody who's been working with you for 6, 8, 10, 12 months. It's just a difference, and it's something with as much turnover as there's been with Alabama during the course of the last few years where it eventually made a difference. And to that former player, that it was something that showed up during the build-up to that national championship game and then in the game itself, and the number that he threw out. And I'm not sure where he saw this, but Clemson during the course of the last 3 or 4 years, whatever it's been, has had all of like 3 assistant coaches leave during the course of the 3 or 4 years leading up to that game. During that same time period, Alabama had something like 20. Just an outrageous number and just a big difference compared to what Clemson had to deal with during that same time span.
And certainly a lot of things. I think there was a lot of first times for Alabama. You know, when you go back and we've tried to give credit where credit's due, Chris Lowe broke the article about a month and a half ago that Pete Golding took over play calling responsibility in the month of September. You look at Pete Golding promoted a defensive coordinator. Is that a good hire from Nick Saban?
Pete, to me, is somebody who's a rising star in the coaching world. I've heard tremendous things about Pete ever since he came to Alabama. And Pete did take over the play calling early in last season. And Saban has been legitimately excited about ever since he was able to get Pete to Tuscaloosa. And somebody that I've heard Pete compared to is Kirby Smart, who's obviously done tremendous things as a coach, doing a great job now at Georgia. And so people that I've talked to in the coaching world see that same kind of potential for Pete and see some similar characteristics there.
Well, and certainly I agree with you. I think he's an up-and-coming star, superstar in the making. But some of the things that went wrong on the defensive side of the football, maybe a little bit more confusion than we've seen in Nick Saban. At first we began to kind of throw the stones at Tosh LaPoy. Then he departs, and you kind of learn that hey, he didn't have the play calling responsibility. So some of those things that you were criticizing,
there's a reason that was expected for Tosh to move on.
So. Repeat it one more time. I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying that there was a reason that it was expected for Tosh to move on. It's because of knowing about the play calling change early in the season, and it was just a natural move for Tosh at that point, essentially being demoted for him to move on.
I got you.
We'll see what Pete does now, where you don't have the balancing between him and Tosh, with Tosh having the defensive coordinator title, still being heavily involved in game planning, and having to balance that with, calling plays and having somebody else heavily involved in the game plan and go along with that. So it'll be interesting to see what Pete does now, where everyone knows he's the defensive coordinator, where you don't have Tosh heavily involved in the game planning to go along with what Pete is doing and where Pete can truly be the guy this year.
You've got a lot of connections. You've covered the NFL. You've been a part of the University of Alabama, covering them. You cover Auburn. You break a lot of stories, cover basketball as well. Let me ask you about Kyle Flood from an offensive line coach. What are you hearing about him? What do you think he brings to Alabama?
Somebody that Steve Sarkisian, I've heard, definitely a fan of. They worked together the last couple of years in Atlanta, and somebody who's definitely respected from an offensive line standpoint. So had the issues he did as a head coach at Rutgers, but had done what seems like a good job the last couple of years with the Falcons, and somebody that Steve Sarkisian had vouched for, but before he was eventually hired at University of Alabama.
We're talking to Matt Zenitz here. When you look at Sark returning, it's a great thing. I think when you look from my perspective, I remember when he got the job December the 15th of 2016, and I remember going back through and trying to do some research and talking to people, even what Nick Saban said. He said, he's a combination, the pro set, the run, the spread combinations, I think is what he wants to bring. But you look at Sark going to the NFL, redefining and even precisely adjusting some of his offensive philosophy. What do you think about this hire?
I think it's TBD, honestly. Obviously, the last couple of years, probably the best way to say it, or the fairest way to say it, is that they were very up and down offensively in Atlanta, and it would be unfair to judge Sark off the one game with Alabama getting thrown into a situation like that leading up to the national championship game. Obviously, a tough deal for him, so it would be unfair to judge him based on that, but like I just said, it was very much up and down in terms of their offense with the Falcons the last couple of years, so I'm curious to see what he can do now, but comes into a very favorable situation for an offensive coordinator where you have the reigning Heisman Trophy runner-up, all of the talent that you'll have around him. So regardless of who you have in there as an offensive coordinator, you would assume that this is an offense that's going to be very, very productive.
We're talking with Matt Zenitz, AL.com. Matt Zenitz covers the University of Alabama as well as some other responsibilities. Let me go into this spring football. Biggest question you have around this football team going into the spring?
I would say position-wise, probably tight end and center. Obviously tight end a significant question mark, especially when you factor in the Keysrick James suspension with him being suspended for the first 4 games of the year. And then center, you're replacing Ross Pierce-Baker. You have Chris Owens as the guy who will probably be the first-team center to begin spring ball. But it'll be interesting to see if you can potentially push him there, or if you could maybe see somebody moved in to add to the competition for that spot. But those are the 2 positions that immediately come to mind as far as ones that'll be interesting to watch, or that would be at the top of the list as far as concerns for the coaching staff. And then we were talking earlier just about the lack of continuity with the coaching staff and how that was potentially an issue leading up to the national championship game. And you're dealing with that again. So it'll be interesting to see just how these new coaches, the 7 of them that are in there now on that coaching staff, how they come in and just start to gel with these players.
Matt, when I follow your Twitter account, you talk a lot about the NCAA transfer portal. Do you know the total number of players that's listed as far as not a number? How many players are listed in this transfer portal?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but there's a lot of them. Okay.
Well, because
it seems like there's a lot of them that go in there every single day.
Sure.
That said, it's a combination of Division I, Division II, Division III players. It's a combination of football, basketball, baseball, track, swimming, all different sports. So the portal, it seems like, has a ton of people in there, but it's a combination of all of those different sports and all of those different levels. Also, so as far as like high level D1 football guys that are going in there on a daily basis, at this point now, I would probably say it's, I don't know, probably less than 5 on a daily basis that are going in there. I think a lot of the movement's already happened as far as what we'll see leading up to spring practice. But then when you get out of spring ball, probably start to see even more guys going back in there again when they get a feel for where they are on their respective depth charts.
Is it a fair assumption that someone inside the football building is over there watching the transfer portal every single day, 6'5", 245, tight end, runs a 4.64, 4.5 40. You think somebody's ever watching the transfer portal to see one of those guys pop up?
I would assume every single school around the country has somebody who's monitoring the transfer portal pretty closely. But the interesting thing with the transfer portal is, at least from what I've heard, that it's just the name that pops up in there. So you'll see the name of a guy, what school they're with, what sport they play, but it doesn't give you any information beyond that. So when you see somebody pop up, it seems like you then have to research from there to see exactly who this person is. So when they pop up in the transfer portal, it's not like you get a full bio to go along with that. You just strictly see the name, the school, and the sport, and then have to do the research from there.
Matt, what can you tell us about Ali Cahoe?
That he wasn't out there for Alabama spring practice, first spring practice the other day, and had heard that there were some issues with him leading up to that. That said, I wasn't expecting him to not be out there for the first spring practice, but was aware of some issues going on leading up to that first spring practice. And we'll see what happens from there. Obviously, Coach Saban said what he did the other day. I mean, I have a feel at this point for where things could go, but at the same time, don't have it to the point of being reportable, so wouldn't want to put it out there without having it to the point where I know 100% what is going on. But we'll have a better feel come next week when things get back started as far as spring ball.
Matt said it's AL.com. Matt, final question. Give me your evaluation. Avery Johnson finished up the fourth regular season here in Tuscaloosa. Your thoughts?
I think that this team should have been a lot better record-wise during the course of the regular season than what they ended up with. The talent that they have, I think if you had told Avery that they would finish with the record that they did regular season-wise at the beginning of the year, if you had told him that they would finish with that record, that he would have been disappointed. And obviously, they're in the tough spot now as far as potentially making the NCAA tournament. I check Bracket Matrix on a regular basis just to see where these bracket projections have Alabama, and the latest one that I saw, which was earlier today, of the 87 latest projections that they've compiled, only 15 of those projections have Alabama making the tournament. And honestly, just based on how Alabama finished the year, losing 6 of the last 8 games, including each of the last 3, I was surprised that even 15 of the 87 had them on there. It would take a really nice run for them in the SEC tournament, in my opinion, for them to have a real chance of making the NCAA tournament.
Hey, Matt.
In my opinion.
Matt, great stuff as always, man. And I'll tell you this, a lot of times I'll prep the show and I'll spend 3 hours prepping the show and I'm writing my notes down and I'm making sure that this is the way that I'm going to go 4 hours. And then something happens and I look at your Twitter account and there's some story breaking. I'm like, forget about that. That 3 hours just went to null. So I appreciate you, man, providing a conversation pieces many times here on the program. Thank you so much for spending a couple of minutes with us here in T-Town.
No problem. Always good to be on with you, Ron.